All right, welcome into Management 542. This is Leadership 2. This is our intro into change, creativity, and innovation. I'm Todd Greer. I'll be your professor this semester, and I'd love to welcome you in. You are the guinea pigs welcomed in for the first time to the brand new lecture capture studio that we have at the University of Mobile. So we will have the opportunity to see really cool things as we think about change and innovation. So we are in a studio using the light board. This is a great opportunity as we think about what does change and innovation look like. So obviously when we think about change and innovation, if we were in a room having this conversation some 50, 60 years ago, instead of having an amazing light board, video camera streaming, utilizing Zoom and other lecture capture technology, we wouldn't be in this at all. In fact, what we would actually have is behind me, you would have a green or black slate chalkboard. We would be writing on it, and that would be our technology of the time. But you fast forward to today, so much new has happened, and we have all of these things available to us right now. So even as I write on this, I am writing. And I'm writing, and that the video that you see is taking everything and flipping it. That is where change and innovation happens. But you think about it, any type of new technology that you bring into an organization, it means that everybody has to be ready for a whole new world. So that's what we're going to be looking at this semester, is how do we think not only about the stuff that happens, but about the people, the process, and very importantly, you as a leader. What does it look like for you to be leading and thinking through the organizational dynamics that come from change and innovation? So you should by now have our textbook, Managing Change, Creativity, and Innovation. This will become to you kind of that guidepost that you have. You'll find in here that we'll be working off of case studies and reflection opportunities. You'll find in here a number of great resources for this semester as you kind of walk through the journey. So Managing Change, Creativity, and Innovation through Sage Publications. It's a great text. In fact, it's probably the best text that I have found in bringing these concepts together. So we're excited about what this looks like. So let's jump right in. Here's a quick piece as we think about introduction to this very concept. So we're going to talk about why are these things important for growth? If you think about it, the great concept that was termed some time ago is change or die. Alan Dush said change or die. Every innovation, every change is an imperative that we have right now that we're facing. So you think about it, we're living through one of the most unique times in the history of mankind. We are going through the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has forced entities who have been very good face-to-face to innovate. What does it look like to be at distance from each other? What does it look like to be behind things like masks? How do we make sure that our organizations are resilient and move forward? We're going to talk about what the change, creativity, and innovation actually look like. How do we differentiate? How do we move forward and think about what that looks like inside your organization? So the why is really important. Why is it important? Well, it's important because these are critical issues. It's always been important for us to be thinking about it, but regardless of the type of organization, whether we're in a church, we're in a school, we're in a for-profit business, or we're in a governmental entity, we are forced to deal with change. And change brings along pretty significant things. You're going to have a social impact of any kind of change. You're going to have economic change. So do I change the business model? Do I change the framework that I look at? Do we invest in innovation to be able to move that forward? And we also want to think about organizational theory. Certainly, in this program, the Master of Science in Leadership and Communication, we want to prepare you for that understanding of what sits underneath the change that's happening as well. And we recognize that it has an ongoing impact throughout. So when we think about it, change is ubiquitous. It happens everywhere. From the moment that you are born, your life has been changed. You may have moved houses and you dealt with the impact of that. You may have felt fractures or new weddings that changed your family composition. You grew and your interests changed. So everything that you see in life has been a consistent piece of change, whether your home, your social, your workplace, your human interactions. You think about that first boyfriend or girlfriend that you had when you were probably in elementary school. That was the beginning of change. Everything moving forward from that was a constant sense of change. Now, change is not always easy. Sometimes change is hard. Sometimes it's, as we see here, it's planned change. It's that point that you make a decision as an organization to work through something, and sometimes change emerges, okay? You see that proactive or reactive. Well, we all dealt with kind of that reactive sense of change with COVID-19. Nobody was sitting there really working to plan for it in organizations. Even those that had thought about this idea of change, of being ready for a potential pandemic or massive things, they weren't ready for the very specific aspects that we saw here. So we have sometimes an internal driver. You think about changes in leadership in an organization. Somebody retires and you talk about what does that transition look like. Other times you're going to have an external driver. Market economies change. So we have a presidential change that we're facing during this semester here. What does that look like? At any point in time, we may have other drivers that change that process for us. So we have to be ready for that change. When we define change, we want to look at this idea of the movement over time. Okay? Movement over time. You want to think about what it used to be, what it's becoming, and what the future will be. All right? You'll see in this a number of different working definitions that we'll see about change, about what we need to understand for it. But think about this idea here. You see it's sometimes planned and managed with the intention of securing anticipated objectives right here. Okay? Anticipated objectives. Now, the reality is we know from history that just because we have an idea and we've worked to build a plan doesn't mean that change is actually going to work in our favor. If you think about it, in many organizations, we see things like, hey, mergers and acquisitions. But the reality is, if you look at mergers and acquisitions, a change happening to an organization, oftentimes with the idea that those changes are going to bring about economic value, many of those mergers and acquisitions actually turn out to be failures because the anticipated objectives aren't always met. So we're going to look at this, and you see here a great change management process. You're describing, you have a concept, and you're thinking about what needs to be done as we move towards that future state. So that's an important piece as we step back and we think about change, okay? But alongside change, we see the continuum that is creativity. Oftentimes when we thought about creativity, we thought that it was a gift from going into the Greek method or the Roman method. It was a gift from the gods. It was this aha, the eureka moment as you see right here. But what we're seeing more and more is that creativity is not that. It's not some muse that's speaking into your brain that's suddenly giving you something. It's truly something that can be developed and nurtured as you see here. It's about looking at and bringing together a combination of the old and the new to think about what could become. So creativity has with it some level of novelty, okay? It's something maybe that didn't exist before. Sometimes it's that new lens. How do I look at the world in a new way? Or a combinatory thinking. We're taking and we're bringing together things that didn't exist before. Oftentimes in the entrepreneurship field, people try to explain what they're working on by using things like, hey, it's a this for a that. It's the Airbnb for the camping space. It's the Airbnb for this, or it's the Uber for this. So we think about that idea of how do we bring together various ideas and opportunities to move it forward. When we talk about characterizing creativity, we want to make sure that we understand there are creators, the people, they have resources that they're drawing on. Sometimes it's past experience, sometimes it's emerging technologies, and they're working through it, and we're looking at it here, right here. Solving everyday problems. That's a big deal, okay? So we want to think about what that looks like. So creativity does come in various places. It's not just in business. It's not only for the creatives, as we used to coin that term, those people that are your graphic designers, your video people. Really, creativity goes much further than that. And so when we look at it, it's a process in which new and useful ideas are generated. So that's important. But there's a difference here when we look at and we think about creativity and other pieces. We want to think about how do we take the creative, the thing that has been coming forward, that new idea, how do we move it into a valuable framework by making it a true innovation that we can take and encapsulate inside of our business. So we want to think about these things as we're moving through the semester. So it's one thing to be creative, it's another thing to take creativity and make it part of your organizational structure so that you're embedding those things and you're moving it forward. But some questions you might want to ponder, you see here, how do you create and maintain the environment? Okay, the environment is so important, and so that's where that leadership structure, your communication framework, that organizational dynamics, those things are so important because creativity can be squelched. You think about it, if you have a boss or you are a boss that says, get your head out of the cloud and start thinking in real and today. Or if you're only working in busy, if you don't take time to reflect, you're not going to encourage and develop new ideas. And so you want to think about, as a leader, how do you build that framework in your mind? All right? You want to think about, how do we make sure that we have these things going on and that our suppliers and our customers also serve in that chain of the creative process? All right? We've got some of these videos. You'll see them in the Canvas modules. They're going to be available for you to be able to kind of look and think about what's happening there. Next, we move into this idea of innovation, all right? Once ideas are generated, we have to move them into existence where they really function in the organization, and that doesn't always happen. So sometimes there's a lot of good ideas, but they're not the right idea. And so that's what we're working for as we think about ideas coming into innovation. So that's a big role of any leader in any organizational structure. How do you make sure that you're working through and building a framework in your organization to know what's the right thing for you as you move forward? You want to translate those from ideas into, as you see here, processes, products, and services. You know, you may have a lot of different reasons for an innovation, all right? And you see them all throughout our society. A lot of times innovation is brought on by necessity. All right, so we have this idea of a necessity. How do I keep myself protected from COVID? I mask up. And so I live in a mask environment, all right? How do I convey information from a faculty member to students that may be anywhere in the world? Well, we use Zoom, we use video technology. How do I take and make it quick and easy and make it assistive for a faculty member to be able to share? Well, we come up with things like the Lightboard to be able to use as we move forward in our organization. So all of these things are here, and you think about what are the reasons. You see a lot of different reasons that could be there for you. So innovation can be a lot of different things. Sometimes it's science-led, and it's taking those things and bringing them into a commercial environment. In fact, our modern internet is actually built on something that came out of the defense industry. You may have heard of the term DARPA before. DARPA was the initial connecting of these internet access points from different computers across the country that were trying to convey this information together. So sometimes it's a military-driven or a science-driven. Here we are, we're in that moment where we're walking through a vaccine for COVID-19. That was a science-driven innovation that was built on a worldwide pandemic need that was driving it forward. So what's the push for it? That's part of that process. What does it do for us? What does it lead us to? And remember that innovation and change and creativity, these things aren't just important in business. If you lead a church or if you work in a church, if you're a lay leader in a church, you know that that's important. If you're in higher ed, if you're in K-12, you know that's important. If you're in a hospital system, you know it's important. And so we see innovation come in a lot of different places, and it's led to a rise here, as we see, of the social innovation, social business, social capital, social network, social entrepreneurship. All of these things are new and different. We really hadn't thought about them prior to this. All right, so we look at and we find some different definitions of what innovation looks like. But you think about it here, Dawson and Andriopoulos, which are our professor, or excuse me, our textbook authors, they share with us this idea right here. You think about it, innovation is the utilization of ideas in solving problems, developing processes, and improving the way we do things and creating new products, services, and organizations. So innovation is not, I thought of something. Innovation is we're putting it into practice. We're embedding that inside of some kind of functionary process and system that can go out and move forward. And managing that innovation is incredibly important. Sometimes you'll hear organizations talk about R&D, research and development. Research and development usually is part of an innovation pipeline where we step back and we think about how does something start, how does it get embedded, and how does it move through into a commercialization process. So managing innovation is incredibly important. It's a complex process. You see here 10% say search, selection, implementation, and capture. And we're going to be walking through that journey as we think about in our own work, in our own role as leaders, as people within organizations, how do we lead those efforts and how do we make sure we're building that culture and context so that can thrive, not just survive, but truly thrive in the process. And so think about what is controlled, what can be controlled, what's the environment look like, what's that culture look like, what's the leadership look like. Even the structure of an organization, we'll deal with and ask questions around, does innovation sit outside of the normal chain of command? Does it have a budgetary line that's outside of a normal chain of command? How do we make sure that it has an opportunity to breathe and that the existing way of doing things, those sacred cows that we have in every organization, that they don't come in and take and eat that innovation process? All of those things are going to be very real for us as we walk through this semester. These are big deals. How do we manage change, creativity, and innovation? You'll see there's a lot of recommended readings. There's a lot of great articles that you'll see through Scribd. You'll see some great articles that we'll have posted within our Canvas modules over the course of semesters. You'll see that we'll have a lot of different videos that'll come up here, and you'll see me popping in each week to give you some of this information, and we'll walk through. We'll have our live sessions 3 times this semester, so we'll have it early on, at the midpoint, and as we work towards the end. You're going to have 2 minor projects and a major project that leads you to the growth that we have for this semester. So a lot of opportunities that are here. We're really excited about what this means because you think about it, every organization faces change and innovation. Every organization sees and functions with that. And so we want to make sure that as you're working through, that you have that understanding and that you see the opportunities ahead of you. I'm excited about this semester. I hope you are too. Keep tuning in and we'll talk more. Thanks.